You've likely heard a lot about Venezuela as of late, as well as the large U.S. military presence off of Venezuela's coast. So why does the U.S. have such an issue with Venezuelan's leader? And are land strikes really on the horizon? We go in depth next.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, guiding you through our timeline of the day's most important news. From a Senate committee meeting to address the rising cost of health care to escalating tensions with Venezuela amid U.S. strikes on boats in the Caribbean. But up first, we started the morning with Scripps News international correspondent Mary Trini Mena in the capital city of Caracas, with reaction as deportation flights to the South American nation continue. U.S.-operated flights returning deported migrants to Venezuela will continue despite President Trump's assertion that the airspace of the South American country should be considered closed. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro announced Tuesday that the twice-weekly flights will go on following a request from the Trump administration. Scripps international correspondent Mary Trini Mena is in the capital city of Caracas, Venezuela, and joins us now. And Mary, what more can you tell us about these flights and the decision to resume them?
Oh, well, the flights has not been paralyzed since February when an envoy from the Trump administration came to Venezuela. But amid these tensions and after the comments made by President Donald Trump warning pilots and drug traffickers to avoid flying above Venezuelan skies, it was expected that those flights were paralyzed. But suddenly there was a communication between the U.S. and Venezuela, and we are expecting a flight today at 3 p.m. from Phoenix, Arizona, carrying about 100 migrants that are returning to the country despite, as you said, the tensions between the two governments.
And Mary, let's talk about those tensions. You know, there have been ongoing incidents of U.S. military strikes on boats from Venezuela. What has been the reaction from Venezuelan government officials? Is there an open investigation in Venezuela into these cases where you are?
Where we are 3 months in since the kinetic strikes began in the Pacific Ocean and also in the Caribbean. And just over the weekend, the Venezuelan parliament announced they will form a commission to look into these killings. They say they are extrajudicial killings, they call it like that. And they say they have contact with family members, but without providing many details or further information about how many Venezuelan nationals could possibly be involved on those strikes. They say it is important to preserve the life of Venezuela despite the activities they were doing, and especially President Nicolas Maduro and other government officials have been very cautious about reporting on those strikes. They say they don't want to spoke a lot about them.
All right, Scripps international correspondent Mary Trini Mena in the capital city of Caracas. Thank you for that update from Venezuela.
You've likely heard a lot about Venezuela in the news recently, as well as the large U.S. military presence stationed off of Venezuela's coast. So who exactly is Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela's leader, and why does the U.S. have such a problem with him?
The Navy's most advanced aircraft carrier, the USS Ford, remains in the Caribbean, as are nearly 15,000 sailors and Marines. Meanwhile, in Washington, the White House has recently designated Venezuela's leaders as members of a foreign terrorist organization for its alleged ties to drugs. Not to mention, since September, a number of boats originating from Venezuela have been destroyed by the U.S. military.
We consider Venezuela to be not a very friendly country.
Victory forever, victory forever.
All of this may have you wondering what is going on between the U.S. and Venezuela. Much of the tension stems from the country's 63-year-old leader, who's been president since 2013. Nicolas Maduro is a former union leader and bus driver, but his election is not recognized by the United States over fraud accusations. Maduro previously served as vice president under Hugo Chavez, Venezuela's leader from 1999 until his death in 2013. Tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela have been well documented over the years. In 2002, Chavez accused the Bush administration of orchestrating an attempted coup. In 2015, President Obama sanctioned Venezuela for human rights abuses. In 2018, President Trump's first administration referred to Maduro's election that year as a, quote, sham. And before leaving office in 2025, President Joe Biden issued a $25 million bounty for Maduro's arrest.
The Maduro administration radicalized very quickly.
Javier Corrales studies the politics of Venezuela at Amherst College. He says Maduro's economic policies, combined with a lack of fair elections, has resulted in mass migration in recent years, as well as a stronger illegal drug industry, issues that have frustrated President Trump. Not to mention, Venezuela has deepened ties with countries like China by selling them Venezuelan oil.
Maduro's hyper-radicalization involved becoming a very mean dictator, incredibly oppressive.
But Corrales says a potential U.S. land strike on Venezuela or any serious effort to oust Maduro would represent a major escalation, and cautions that while the U.S. military is more powerful, Venezuela's military is one of the largest in the Americas. Joe St. George, Scripps News Group, Washington.
Now let's take a quick look at some of the other major headlines from today. The Trump administration is pausing immigration applications for individuals from 19 countries. That's according to a policy memo from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The 19 countries were facing travel restrictions to the U.S. under a presidential proclamation issued in June. They include Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, Venezuela, and Cuba. The memo also places a hold on all asylum applications regardless of one's nationality, pending a comprehensive review. This comes days after one National Guard member was killed and another critically wounded in a shooting in Washington, D.C. Costco is suing the Trump administration over tariffs the retailer calls unlawful. The company says the duties make it harder to keep prices low for customers. The lawsuit appears tied to a separate Supreme Court case that could determine whether companies can get refunds. Experts say other retailers may follow suit if the tariffs are ruled illegal. And Derek Chauvin is seeking a new trial in the murder of George Floyd. The former Minneapolis police officer has served 5 years of a 22-and-a-half-year sentence. Chauvin's attorney filed court documents asking that 3 criminal convictions be vacated. The filing accuses prosecutors of misconduct and argues false testimony from expert witnesses deprived him of a fair trial. Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
The family separation happened because of a failure by FIFA to properly assess the risks for fans and families and to mitigate those risks.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's return to our briefing of today's top stories. The House Judiciary Committee has subpoenaed Jack Smith, one of President Trump's top political foes. The committee wants Smith to testify on December 17th. House and Senate Republicans have zeroed in on Smith's election-related investigation of Trump, describing it as a scandal that, quote, unnecessarily swept up hundreds of Republican lawmakers and Trump allies as part of the probe. Smith has repeatedly stood by his work as special counsel, which eventually involved bringing 2 sets of criminal charges against President Trump over the 2020 election and over alleged retention of classified documents. Jack Smith dropped both cases after Trump won the 2024 election. The Trump administration is now threatening to withhold SNAP benefits from 21 blue states. SNAP was put on hold during the government shutdown, and now the Trump administration says it will withhold funds to states that refuse to provide the USDA information on who's receiving those benefits. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said the agency is trying to eliminate fraud and abuse. Several Democratic states sued the Agriculture Department to block that request. So how will President Trump's sweeping immigration arrest affect one of the biggest sporting events on earth? That's a question human rights advocates are asking today about the 2026 World Cup, set to take place in the U.S. as well as Mexico and Canada. Now, they're pointing to the arrest of a man in New Jersey and shows that there's a risk for immigrants attending the games next year. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra live in our D.C. newsroom. And Patrick, all right, so a big event leading up to the World Cup takes place in D.C. this Friday. So people must be wondering what's going to happen.
Absolutely. That is the reason for the timing of these human rights advocates speaking out today about their concerns involving immigrants and other non-citizens that will be attending a lot of these events, including Friday. That is when President Trump will host the World Cup draw at the Kennedy Center here in town. That's when 48 teams will be divided into groups ahead of next year's World Cup. Here in the U.S., 78 games will be played in 11 different cities, and human rights groups say they have serious concerns about immigration and customs enforcement targeting non-citizens who plan to attend any of the matches. Talking about millions of people, including athletes, workers at the stadiums, and thousands of fans at each individual game. These groups, including Human Rights Watch, pointing to the case of a father who was arrested near a Club World Cup game in New Jersey over the summer after flying a drone in restricted airspace by MetLife Stadium. He is described to us as an asylum seeker, which suggests that he was not a legal resident here in the United States, but we don't have his name. Human Rights Watch is not releasing his name, so we've not been able to independently verify their claims. They say he was immediately turned over to ICE after that arrest because of flying the drone, and then sent to a detention center before being deported, separating him from his two sons. Human Rights Watch is really looking at FIFA, the organizing body for the World Cup, saying that FIFA is failing to protect non-citizens who are going to their events.
A minor drone violation became a 3-month detention and then a deportation. The family separation happened because of a failure by FIFA to properly assess the risks for fans and families and to mitigate those risks.
Now, because of these issues, Iran, the country, already saying that they're not going to come to this World Cup draw at the Kennedy Center on Friday. Meanwhile, FIFA says it is working with the White House, the State Department, and Homeland Security to address some of these concerns and to make sure that people that they say are eligible to be at these events don't have run-ins with immigration and customs enforcement. Meanwhile, President Trump saying the administration will expedite visas for foreign visitors coming to the games who have gone through vetting. 5 to 10 million people expected to attend World Cup games beginning June of next year. Holly?
So, Patrick, the president also put a travel ban in place for 12 countries, which also includes Haiti. They qualified for the World Cup. So how will those restrictions affect the games?
Well, the president is promising exemptions for athletes from those countries on that list, which, by the way, might be growing in the coming days, those countries that have travel bans. So that would apply to the athletes, the coaches, other staff. But what about all the fans? Take Haiti as an example. Those fans living in Haiti likely would not be able to play in the United States. And then, of course, you have the other issue about people that are undocumented in this country. What happens if they try to attend the games? Will ICE turn these into enforcement operations? That remains to be seen. Holly?
All right, investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra live for us. Thank you for that interesting information. We appreciate it. Just ahead on Today As It Happened, Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty gives us a look at the balance of power in the House after Tuesday's special election in Tennessee.
We're going to push America first. We're going to stand with the president and the speaker on every part of America first. And we're excited to do that. We're going to work on affordability. We're going to support veterans and military. Fort Campbell is a huge piece of our district, and we're going to fight for that from day one.
Analysis is straight ahead. Thanks for joining us again on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
A federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from making those widespread immigration arrests in Washington, D.C. without warrants. The decision coming after complaints from civil liberties groups, the judge ruling that ICE was making the arrest without probable cause in neighborhoods with large Latino populations. Agents are now required to document all of the arrests that they make before any arrests have been made. Another presidential pardon, this time in Texas. Democrat and his wife, Congressman Henry Cuellar, was charged with bribery and money laundering. Trump says he was unfairly targeted by the Biden administration because he was critical of Biden's immigration policies. Cuellar was accused of accepting thousands of dollars in bribes. Cuellar has said he and his wife are innocent. The results are in. The Democrats are celebrating and the Republicans are breathing a sigh of relief. Just two of the reactions in a congressional special election that saw a Democrat celebrating a loss. Why? It was close in Tennessee, which is deep red Trump country.
We're going to push America first. We're going to stand with the president and the speaker on every part of America first. And we're excited to do that. We're going to work on affordability. We're going to support veterans and military. Fort Campbell is a huge piece of our district, and we're going to fight for that from day one.
Scripps News Political Director Ed Rafferty joins us now live. And Raf, can you break down exactly what happened last night and why Democrats are celebrating a loss?
Yeah, well, look, this was the last big election of 2025, really setting the stage for 2026, which, oh, by the way, Del, just happens to be a midterm year. You may have heard about that. So really both sides are sort of gauging where they stood going into the new year. And this was probably the best example of people actually voting, not looking at a survey, not looking at a poll. Matt Van Epser, the winner, of course, Republican. The reason why Democrats are celebrating, as you said, or cautiously optimistic, as I would maybe frame it, is because what we saw in Tennessee is the same thing we saw in places like Florida, Virginia, and Arizona. And that is where they have been dramatically overperforming where they did just a year ago. They're not necessarily flipping seats in those states. We had a couple special elections this year that are all said and done. And in each one, the Democrat did better by a double-digit margin than the Democrat on the ballot the year prior. Now, last night, that was a district that Donald Trump won by 22 points. It looks like the Democrat, Afton Bain, will fall 9 points short. So it's a little bit of a slimmer margin than some of the others that we saw going into or earlier in the year. But I think you could say that accounts for the tremendous amount of attention that was paid on this race by Republicans, specifically by the president on Truth Social the nights before.
The last time I saw a celebration like that, the Wheeling Country Day Cougars, of which I was a member, only got beat by the Lindsley, whatever they were, by about 90 points. So that was better than the year before. What does it mean for Democrats, though, moving forward?
Well, look, I think they are reading a lot of tea leaves, and the comparison you're going to hear is back to 2018. You remember those midterms of President Donald Trump's first stint in office where Democrats did exceedingly well. There were a handful of races in 2017, special elections, where Democrats overperformed. And the thinking being that this is all sort of a foreshadowing of what's to come. It is interesting because, you know, I mentioned that Afton Bain, the Democrat, didn't do maybe quite as well as some of those others, but she was also a pretty progressive candidate running in, as we mentioned, a deep red district. So there were probably some more, if she was a more moderate sort of facing candidate, could have even kept it a little bit closer. But if you're a Democrat heading into a midterm year, you are feeling mighty confident about just the political headwinds. Of course, a lot can change, but it also will be interesting. We've already seen a lot of Republicans in the House announce retirements. It'll be interesting to see over the couple weeks that we have here before the end of the year if that number grows at all.
She bought Al Gore out of the woodworks. Fascinating to see him back on the political scene. Scripps News Political Director Andrew Rafferty. Raf, as always, thank you.
Thanks.
Some of the other stories we're following for you right now. The Northeast is bracing for its coldest temps of the season. Tomorrow morning's temps could plunge to 5 degrees in Chicago, -4 in Minneapolis, -1 in Green Bay, and 8 degrees in Kansas City. Weekend temps may be better, but not by much. Still likely to feel cooler than average in the north and the Northeast. And there is still time to grab your ticket for tonight's massive Powerball drawing. Right now, a whopping $775 million. No one won last night, so you can increase your odds of winning by buying more tickets. They're $5 these days, but even then, the odds are astronomically high. You are more likely to get struck by lightning or eaten by a shark.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, after the longest ever federal government shutdown, Congress is still at a stalemate regarding the rising price of health care. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed followed a Senate committee hearing Wednesday as the expiration date on health care subsidy looms at the end of the month. We'll have his reporting right after the break. You're watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News recap of the day's biggest events. So let's dive right in.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you and I agree.
We do.
The status quo is not working. I look forward to your signing on to Medicare for All so that we can finally do what every other country on earth does, guarantee health care to all people as a human right. Let me very briefly, and I don't have a lot of time, ask the panelists very briefly, yes, no. Should the United States, in fact, join every other major country on earth, guarantee health care to all people as a human right? Mr. White?
I think the experience we've seen in every other country is that it doesn't work well.
Doesn't work well, huh? Ms. Strauss?
I would say, looking at the way the ACA has worked for us, absolutely not. This is the first indication that it will not work in the United States.
Dr. Fegan, you've studied other countries around the world. Mr. White says they don't work all over the world. Countries want to join the United States, see a doubling of their health care costs, and deny millions of their people without health care. Is that what the trend is?
You should ask the people with
Dr.
the conditions
Fegan,
in those countries
Ms.
how
Strauss,
they get treated.
you had your time. Dr. Fegan?
Yeah. Every other country has managed to cover over 99% of their population, and their life expectancy is longer than ours, and they spend half as much as we do. We absolutely should do it.
In just a matter of weeks, millions of Americans will either see their health care costs soar or thank Washington for a last-minute solution to a decades-old problem. That problem is what to do with Obamacare or ACA or the Affordable Care Act, take your pick. Right now, if nothing is done, some could see their out-of-pocket costs soar by at least 26%. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live on Capitol Hill tracking all of this. And Nate, what are you hearing from both sides at this point?
Well, Del, look, Democrats are largely in favor of an extension of those Affordable Care Act subsidies before the end of the year. This is something that they were willing to shut down the government over and have been campaigning on for quite some time. Republicans, though, they've largely been divided. There are some Republicans who say that extending those Affordable Care Act subsidies might be necessary as effectively a stepping stone to coming up with a longer-term, more comprehensive solution. Here's Senator John Husted, the Republican from Ohio, who's up for re-election next year.
With a package of reforms, I would be willing to support the extension of ACA credits. Obamacare and the ACA are broken. People are trapped. They don't have any options. Their costs are going up. And the subsidies temporarily put a Band-Aid on the problem, but we have some longer-term fixes that need to be done. All of that needs to be part of the package, but we can only do so much in a couple of weeks. So we have a short-term solution, we have a long-term solution.
How important is President Trump's support to get this across the finish line?
I believe the president understands the issue and wants to help, and his support would be very important.
And look, Del, at one point the president did weigh in on this. He said that he wanted to see an extension of those Affordable Care Act subsidies, but he's largely been quiet about it for the last several weeks. Now, the timeline here really is the story. The fact that lawmakers just have about 2.5 weeks before the effective end of the year for them when they return home for the holiday recess. Once they do so, it seems like it'll be impossible to get anything done because they simply won't be here in Washington. So there's a really big push right now to try and get something done on the issue of affordable health care, but there are certainly Republican senators who are more pessimistic, who say they just don't think the next 2.5 weeks are enough time to get anything meaningful done, any sort of bipartisan solution across the finish line that, of course, would be able to go to President Trump's desk for a signature before the new year and, of course, the end of open enrollment early next year. Here's Senator Eric Schmidt, the Republican from Missouri. Do you think you can do something bipartisan in the handful of days you've got left this year?
Well, again, Democrats haven't offered anything other than what hasn't been working, so we'll see. I think we'll probably have some vote of some kind on probably two dueling provisions. But again, I'm not very optimistic that the Democrats are willing to reform a broken system.
Senator John Thune, the majority leader, has been fairly noncommittal about what Republicans' alternate proposal would look like if there is a counter proposal that they'll be able to come up with in the next 2.5 weeks. And at this point, the issue of health care is still dividing the Republican Party, much like it has for the better part of the last decade. Republicans during President Trump's first administration tried to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. They were unsuccessful at doing so. There's a big reason why the One Big Beautiful Bill earlier this year did not include any sort of replacement for the Affordable Care Act. It's in part because Republicans just do not necessarily see eye to eye on the best path forward. Some Republicans, like Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, say that the best path forward, putting money into health savings accounts that Americans could use to pay down their premiums. But again, not all Republicans see eye to eye on that, and at this point, it's still not clear if there is a comprehensive solution.
Yeah, the president during the debates, who can forget when he said that he was working on a concept of a health care plan. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed for us live on Capitol Hill. Nate, thank you very much. In Texas, Congressman Pete Sessions says he's hoping for a new plan for health insurance will prevent another government shutdown and help families as well. Charles Molinaw with our Scripps News Group in Waco tells us more about this proposed solution.
Republicans have failed to counter with a workable solution.
Waco Congressman Pete Sessions says a showdown over government-funded health insurance is inevitable between now and the end of January. To head off another shutdown, he says his fellow Republicans need a plan Americans will support.
We have to produce something to take care of all these people that are on Obamacare.
The compromise that ended the federal shutdown last month did not resolve Democrats' demands to add $1 trillion to subsidize Affordable Care Act health insurance. Without that money, millions of Americans will see their premiums skyrocket. Sessions says one-size-fits-all ACA insurance plans need to change.
There are a lot of things the Affordable Care Act requires that people do not have or need. If you were 50 years old, did not want to have any children, you still had to purchase a plan to have children. And so people said, I don't want that, I can't afford that. So it made overnight insurance more expensive.
Sessions is proposing his own plan, which he calls parity, a subsidy up to $12,000 per family to cover half the cost of choosing and buying their own insurance, just like employer-sponsored insurance they would get through work.
It really comes back to let me buy insurance based upon my needs. I do or don't have a problem. I do or don't want children. You should be able to purchase it similarly to the way you purchase car insurance.
And now let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. The Pentagon's watchdog group saying Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth put U.S. personnel and their mission at risk by sharing sensitive information on that messaging app. Hegseth used Signal to provide details of warplane launches and bombs before that military strike against Houthi rebels in Yemen. All of this coming to light when a journalist was added to the Signal text chain by then National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The chain included Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and others. Hegseth also created another Signal chat with 13 other people, including his wife and brother, where he shared similar strike details. UPS is being sued twice. The wrongful death suits stem from that deadly crash of a cargo plane in Kentucky. The suit alleges that UPS put profits over safety by flying older planes without stepping up its maintenance checks. The MD-11 jet crashed during takeoff last month after its left engine actually flew off, the crash killing 14 people. Federal investigators say they found cracks where the engine connected to the wing. Lawyers say the engine mount hadn't been inspected since 2021. All similar planes used by UPS and FedEx have since been grounded. You may leave your heart in San Francisco, but don't leave your bottle of Coke. This week, the city filing the first of its kind lawsuit against some big-name food manufacturers, General Mills, Kraft Heinz, and Coca-Cola. The city says that ultra-processed foods are creating a public health crisis. The city's attorneys say they knew it. The lawsuit alleges the companies use Big Tobacco's playbook to target children and minorities. They say they want the companies to pay for healthcare costs and stop deceptive marketing practices.
More of today's top stories ahead on Today As It Happens. Stay right there. Welcome back to Today As It Happens, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. So let's pick up right where we left off.
House Democrats investigating Jeffrey Epstein, releasing more than a dozen photos and videos from his property in the Virgin Islands, the island becoming known as Epstein Island. Justice Department deadline to release all of the documents is now just 2 weeks away. National correspondent Alex Miller has been combing through the images as she does each time these document dumps happen. Alex, what are we seeing here?
Well, Del, these are images and videos that we are seeing from both inside and outside Jeffrey Epstein's property in the Virgin Islands. I want to go through these images with you. The first one, arguably the most confusing, maybe perplexing, difficult to describe. Let's look at these images. This is an image from inside of his home of what appears to be a dentist chair and masks of middle-aged men on the walls. We don't know exactly what this room was used for. This is a tight shot of his living room. Some of those words are redacted, but the words power, deception, we've seen those. This is a bigger image of his living room. That is from the inside, of course, of his house. This is one of the phones that he used. We can see that at least 4 names are redacted. This is redacted by the House committee themselves. They decided to redact those images. We'll see if we learn who those people are. Obviously, this no trespassing sign. This is a window into the massive property that was Jeffrey Epstein's on Epstein Islands. We can see through these videos the bedrooms, bathrooms that are used, as well as the outside of his home, which is incredibly vast. We can see through some of the videos that we'll get to in a second, the fact that he was obviously on an island, his property was waterfront, and he had these big, incredible pools and spacious areas throughout this entire property. Del, we know that many people from the flight logs that we have seen so far, many well-known men flew on planes with Jeffrey Epstein and spent time on Epstein Island.
Alex, we know the committee's work continues. Why are they releasing these images now, and what can we expect to see for the months in, especially seeing as how the clock is now ticking on what the Justice Department has to do?
Yeah, they have just over 2 weeks to get that information to the American public. But the investigation is a little bit different for the House Oversight Committee. There's a subpoena that they have on the Department of Justice. So they have to continue getting information, not only from the Department of Justice that they're trying to get information turned over, but also from the Epstein estate. So they are constantly getting information. We know from sources that they are constantly conducting interviews, looking into new leads that they have. And so they are basically turning over this information as they get it. We heard from the top Democrat today on the committee, Congressman Garcia, where he talked about this. He is still asking the president himself to release these files immediately, in part in his statement. He also said that these new images are a disturbing look into the world of Jeffrey Epstein and his island. He says they're releasing the photos and videos to ensure public transparency in their investigation. Now, by the way, they are still trying to get more information. We learn now that there has been documents that they have just received from JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank, sources telling us just last week that this is something that they were trying to get, and that they are trying to get information from other banks as well. The committee, according to Garcia, is going to review the files that they got from JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank in the coming days, and then they're going to release them. Also on the docket, the Clintons, both former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, have both been asked to testify before the committee. This is a rescheduled time because of the government shutdown. They've been asked to testify in just 2 weeks behind closed doors before the committee. It's unclear whether that is actually going to end up happening, but it is what has been requested of them.
And as you know, the victims have been saying all along, follow the money. It appears that the House committee is doing exactly that. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live for us in New York City. Alex, thank you very much. President Trump rolling back the mileage rules for automakers. The proposal would significantly reduce fuel economy requirements through the 2031 model year, reversing Biden-era policies that encourage cleaner running cars and those EVs. Trump now says the new rules would increase access to affordable gas-powered vehicles. In his words, top executives from the big 3 automakers are praising the planned changes. Environmentalists say it only worsens America's oil dependence and also global warming. Israel says it will now begin allowing Palestinians to leave the territory through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. That decision coming after Israel received remains of what could be one of the last hostages in Gaza. The remains have yet to be examined by forensic experts to determine if they match either of the two remaining hostages who are still missing. Egypt wants the crossing to allow movement in both directions. Vaccine advisors selected by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. plan to vote on ending routine hepatitis B shots for newborns. The panel's new chair saying they're also looking at whether childhood vaccines are behind rising allergies and autoimmune disorders. The committee is focused on aluminum used in vaccines despite decades of safe use. Public health experts warn any changes would be devastating to children's health and undermine vaccination programs. ICE launching a major crackdown in New Orleans on Wednesday, calling the operation Catahoula Crunch after the Louisiana state dog. Homeland Security insisting that they are going after people who have committed major crimes like home invasion, armed robbery, and rape. But some businesses in New Orleans have closed altogether to avoid being targets. Similar operations have targeted Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Charlotte.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
Each day there's a new explanation. Over the weekend, the Secretary of Defense said there wasn't a second strike and the media were all fake news and that there was no second strike. He just implied that the whole thing was untrue. And then this week they say there was a second strike. He says, well, I wasn't there, I left the room. People floundering around in the water, clinging to wreckage, have been incapacitated, and under no theory of war are they an opportunity to be killed. So I think it was wrong on all fronts, but I don't like the Secretary of Defense blaming on a military commander. These commands came from him, and I think the buck stops with him.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's continue our walk through the day's top headlines.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is facing bipartisan scrutiny involving his use of military force. The report surfacing over the weekend of a so-called double tap, a second strike on that alleged drug boat while two survivors were clinging to life. Several lawmakers and experts say if that happened, it would rise to the level of a war crime or even murder. Here's the Defense Secretary yesterday at the cabinet meeting.
I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded in fire or smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war.
Colonel Mark Cassian is a senior advisor with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He spent more than 3 decades in the Marine Corps. Colonel, thanks for being with us. We hear several terms being bandied around about if this was a double tap, it could be a war crime or murder. Is that hyperbolic?
Well, it's not hyperbolic in the sense that many people see an ethical difference between the first strike on a boat that seemed to be smuggling drugs and a second strike that was aimed at helpless crew members who were now clinging to wreckage. Arguably, the first strike had a thin justification under international law, but it has a different feel, and that's why you see all this opposition in Congress, which you did not see previously.
So let me ask you this. If you had been asked and you knew that there were people clinging to life in the wreckage of that first missile strike, and we now understand by several reports that Scripps News has not independently verified that there may have been 4 missiles fired at that boat. If you had seen survivors floating in the water as part of the wreckage and you were ordered to carry out a missile strike, would you have accepted that order and carried it out?
The military teaches you to do 2 things in a situation like this. The first is get the order in writing. A phone call can be denied. In writing makes it official. And the second thing is to go to the lawyers and say, is this legal? So that we protect both our military and are confident that what we're doing conforms to international law.
So the question remains, would you have done it?
That's a tough one. If Hegseth had refused to issue a written order, I would have refused. If he had sent a written order and the lawyers said it was legal, that's a tough one. But I think the answer would, I hope, be no. But that puts the commander in a tough position. And I think that's the position the Admiral was in. That is, he's getting pressure from his commander, his boss, to take this step. And I think what he did is afterwards pushed back and felt that this was wrong because the U.S. policy changed. After this, we rescued or allowed rescue of survivors.
Mark, apologies for putting you on the spot, but you can see how difficult this is now for the men and women in uniform. There seems to be an effort to say that the buck doesn't stop with the defense secretary, but instead with Admiral Frank Bradley, who is the man who is alleged to carry out the orders. Critics say that is throwing the military men and women under the bus. Do you agree?
It puts the admiral in a very difficult position because he is now being held responsible for this action, even though the political elements say they support him. Secretary Hegseth talks a lot about accountability, but in this case, he doesn't regard accountability as applying to him.
The president's saying these are bad people. They deal drugs out to hurt the American people. Does that argument negate any concerns about any possible war crimes? And does the pardoning of a president accused of bringing hundreds of tons of cocaine into this country, does that really complicate and muddy the waters with regards to the White House argument that they're trying to clean up drug penetrating the United States borders?
Well, starting with the second item, the pardon, it certainly does. But on the first question about, these are bad people. Well, they are bad people. They are bringing drugs into the United States. And it has been a bipartisan policy to prevent drugs from coming to the United States and to interdict them. What's new is the lethal force that's being used. The strikes on the boats without warning. In the past, the Coast Guard had intercepted them and made this a law enforcement effort, not a military effort.
I'm Holly Furfer. Have a wonderful Wednesday night.